morning, Max. How are you?
Morning, mate. Very well. Monday morning.
I don't know when people are going to listen to this or when we're going to publish, but it's always Monday morning somewhere.
Exactly.
So who's our guest today, Max?
Our guest is the fantastic Alex from Mitiga Solutions, who is the co-founder and CEO and has spent nearly 6 years at this business. He has a varied career covering the intersection between climate risk and artificial intelligence. Also holds a position as chairman of the UN ITU focus group on AI for natural hazards. Previously spent 10 years at the Barcelona Supercomputing Centre, some of which was in parallel with Mitiga as it was a spin-out. Has been a climate researcher at the UK's Met Office, data lead at the State of New Jersey's research department, and a research fellow at Rutgers University. He holds 2 PhDs in applied physics for climate risk, one from the Polytechnic University of Catalonia and the other as a combined degree between the universities of Exeter and Cambridge in England. Alex, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Hi, Max. Hi, Jaime. Not sure
Thanks
about
for
the
being
fantastic Alex. I feel like out of an Avengers movie, but thank you for having me.
We'll leave the judgment to the end of the podcast and let's see what people say about
Fair
that.
enough.
So maybe as a way to kick off, Alex, that is all in all an absolutely fascinating career. What are the themes? I mean, obviously, AI, climate risk are two of the big themes in there, but what are the themes that have taken you through this and how have you made the decisions that have taken you on the journey you've been on today?
Yeah, fair enough. So I think the reason why I ended up doing a spin-off with Mitiga was basically I was talk about the equation of climate risk. No? Climate risk maybe has three variables, one being academia, the other one being the industry, and finally regulations, right? So for many years, and I started my career in climate, as you mentioned, many years ago, I always found that this equation was unbalanced. While science was very much at the forefront of researching and evaluating, climate signals of where we were going to go and what we did have to do to not go that way. I always found that regulation was somewhere in between, waiting for industry to pick up. With years, I have seen these equations kind of like balancing and finally having a final equation that made sense. So I would say that my journey has been from science to industry, going through the regulatory framework and trying to balance that equation, if that makes sense.
And Alex, when did you start getting interested in these fields? I mean, is it something that already happened in high school, so before university? Is it something that happened after university? What's the source of all of this?
Well, it's a good question. It started right after high school. So my whole family, they are doctors, and I guess the expectation is that I was going to do med school as well. And quickly there, I realized that that's not what I wanted to do. And obviously, when you come out of high school, you're not clear about what you want to do. But probably what I had, it was a path. I don't know how wide or narrow that path was, but the environment, it was the path that I wanted to walk. So I started a lot with the regulatory framework of environment. A lot of my degree, it was on environmental sciences here, not before I left to the States. And it was about the intersect between the science component of environmental science and the regulatory side of environmental science. At the time, the famous ISO 14000 and so forth. No? So how to evaluate what were the challenges of the environment and how to try to regulate them to kind of do something about it. So that was how my, if you want, academic career started. And little by little, it started shaping. No? It was when I got to the US that I had this great opportunity to work for the state of New Jersey right after I graduated. And I had this unbelievable boss, Francisco Artigas, which for me, it was a genius. He just will look at the world from an angle that I never saw before. So I
What
just tried to
angle?
be. He was trying to solve problems that people didn't even see. So I remember when he was looking. Well, we were working at the New Jersey Meadowlands Commission, which is very close to New York, and it's all like the Meadowlands area. So. And he already was talking about that time, and this was early 2000s, about sea level rise. So he will have me go through the Meadowlands, which is he's from Chile, so he will feel very comfortable going like in the middle of the little jungle with a boat. But he will put me a pair of boots. He will give me a sand of clay, and he will get me in the middle of the Meadowlands, trying to have a little bit of patch, put in a little bit of clay, and just taking a picture and maybe come in, a year later and see if the clay will be above or under the water to kind of prove. And we will do that year after year to see if the sea level was growing. No, we will do toxicology analysis from heavy metals, from roadkills within the area. So we started doing aerial imagery by inventing balloon photography. So we would just put this balloon together and put a camera with a remote trigger and start taking pictures to see if the ponds, the pieces of water in the Meadowlands, they were shrinking or expanding through time. And we will do that year after year, going and putting solar panels in the middle of the Meadowlands to power little GPS units that they will measure air quality. This was all early 2000s. Nobody was really talking about any of these things. So that's where my curiosity came from. And I think I was, with the best person that I could at the time to kind of like be a sponge and absorb all that. From there, it was just downhill.
And how did you? So could you give for our listeners and indeed ourselves a little bit of an overview of what Mitiga does, and then I'd also love to use that as a way to segue into talking about the Supercomputing Centre and maybe what it does and also where it came from as a business.
Yeah. So what Mitiga does today is trying to characterize the risk associated to climate in different shapes and forms. So when we look about risk, and we'll go more into detail, you can always look at climate risk from two angles, top bottom and bottom up. Top bottom is kind to see the signals where climate is going to take us, and then bottom up to calculate the actual hazards that compose climate risk. So Mitiga basically tries to cover these two angles to help companies across different segments to characterize their physical risk, to comply with the regulations that are coming associated reporting that climate risk, and finally to quantify monetarily the actual impact of those risks and try to mitigate them. And that is both from asset managers, risk managers, and risk takers, so people who needs to report, reduce, and collateralize risk, all the way to the humanitarian space who needs to respond to that risk. That's what we do today. Where we come from, as you mentioned, Max, we come from as a spin-off of the National Supercomputing Centre, and a lot of the technology that we use today, it was kind of like brainstorm or engineered back then. So we started doing something that it was very focused and very niche, probably, which it was characterizing the impact of volcanic eruptions to the aviation industry. And that was just the beginning. That's how we spun out. We started working with airlines, and
was that a certain Icelandic volcano in what would it have
that
been?
was that
2012. Was it 2012?
It was 2010, and it was
2010.
the Playa del Yakut eruption, which is a very good example because at the time it's not like we overestimated the impact. There was a big impact, but we closed 75% of the airspace where probably wasn't needed. But the lack of good information and the fear of whatever could happen if we actually didn't close the airspace force us to kind of like overreact.
Mm-hmm.
And underreacting is definitely bad, especially when it comes about natural disasters. Overreacting is not as bad, but it's bad enough. That's where a lot of research in volcanology started. A lot of funding was coming from the European Commission that way. And at the time, I was still in England, mainly focusing about climate risk. But it was in 2013 when I arrived at the National Supercomputing Centre that we started looking at that.
And can you explain, Alex, what this Barcelona Supercomputing Center is? Because
Sure.
I'm sure people have heard about it, but I think you're probably one of the first few guests that we've had on the podcast that worked at it.
Yeah. So the BSC, which is short for Barcelona Supercomputing Centre, is the national center that actually hosts Mare Nostrum, which is one of the largest supercomputers in Europe. It's part of a European network of supercomputers. And as an institution, it's a consortia between the Spanish government, the Catalan government, and the Polytechnic University of Catalonia. The main objective of the center is basically to push the state of the art into research. So it has 4 disciplines: earth science, life science, and computer science. And then a fourth one that is called CASE, Computer Applications in Science and Engineering, which is where we come from, which, if you want, is more your applied sciences. So from there, you will have anything that has to do with using supercomputing capabilities and AI to solve complex problems, environmental problems like Mitiga, biomedical problems, like there is another spin-off that does that as well. So again, it's a very nice center that tries to empower researchers with state-of-the-art tools to actually push the state-of-the-art of the science.
And sorry, just quickly on that topic, one of the things that I think there's been a lot of talk about, especially in the UK recently, is university spin-outs and how much they struggle, right? How the terms that universities have been offering spin-out startups have been incredibly draconian in sense of taking too much equity, putting crazy restrictions on use of IP. As far as I understand from the Supercomputing Centre, and I was speaking to an IoT founder who spun out of there recently, there seems to be quite a healthy understanding that the level of IP that is kind of born out of the Supercomputing Centre will decrease over time, and the equity stakes that it takes are not insane. Would you agree with that in terms of the feeling that it works? And what do you think that they get right in doing that?
Right. So Mitiga was one of the first ones. So obviously, when we spun out, we were still navigating the weeds of what a spin-off was and what the tech transfer process should be. And I believe through the years, it has been evolving. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to define what the right amount of equity is when you're trying to transfer something that, in a way, it's still in papers. It is like in scientific publications. And this is probably what it needs to change, that before you actually properly spin out, you actually have more work done in terms of what the business model would be, have a little bit of a check back with investors, with the industry, couple of POCs, rather than just transfer science, putting these entrepreneurs into the industrial ecosystem, and maybe to realize that maybe we invented a very nice square wheel, and that it was great for papers, but in a way it was not so good for industry. When it comes about valuing that, how you really do that, right? Is the number of lines of codes, is the number of PhDs and postdocs that they have been working on this. So the code that we transfer at Mitiga was like very simple. There wasn't, like a mega code that was proprietary for volcanic ash, looking at the impact of airline. However, the knowledge that we transfer, the people that we went there, and the possibility that we had to work with so many different projects that they were so transversal is what made Mitiga what it is today. How do you really quantify that? While in other spin-offs, probably you have transferred 10 years of a code that it's very valuable. So this is not an easy task. And I don't know what's the right and wrong answer. That's why I think, it should be measured by the capabilities that the spin-off probably has with the technology that is being transferred, rather than, to give, an average, 20% is what it is, because you might kill some companies just from the start, and that's tricky. So I know that it has evolved, and for every case, it has been negotiated a little bit different. And also, I mean, let's be honest, it's a component of that one is how well and how prepared you are at the time that you need to negotiate those things with the center, and so that's a difficult one, which probably requires a little bit more work to achieve.
And how do those spin-outs generally function? Is it that is there a kind of like almost kind of mini incubator program within the idea that when an idea reaches kind of, as you would consider, commercial viability, it's standard that it could and should be spun out, and then you will assemble a team within it? Or are you bringing in external talent for kind of ideas that the supercomputing center itself is generating and saying, actually, Alex and your co-founder and a bunch of other people, we think this is a relevant problem that has commercial viability. Could you come and work on it? Like, how does the structure work?
Yes. And again, this has evolved, no? Before it used to be, okay, we have an idea. Let's build a business plan around it, and kind of like, let's bring this idea with the business plan to an executive committee that decides whether that should constitute a spin-off or not. Does it use technology from the center, and does it make sense that the center has an equity stake on the cap table? No. Now it's a little bit more professionalized, and I would say we are halfway where we should be. So now there is a program that is called the Innovation Journey. where it all starts one step before. It starts at the idea before even the scientists are even thinking about putting a company together. So this is a program where put some scientists that now it's even a competitive process where people needs to apply and there is more demand than offer. And then the tech transfer team will go through a journey where basically we'll explain what transferring science into industry means, from all the way from a business plan to, how to protect your IP, what to do, what not to do, the basic stuff, but at least the future to be entrepreneur can have, the rules of engagement before, puts their great scientific idea at that committee. The important thing that happens in Barcelona is the community, is the mesh, the network that you have in order to be able to become an entrepreneur. So it's not only at the center that they have this program, but you have programs around, like in Barcelona Activa, where you have the pre-acceleration program. There is a program also with different universities that is called actually From Science to Market, that it helps science profiles to understand the whole process before a spin-off or a company needs to be established. And then you have the business schools where help you, looking at the business angle. So if you have all the pieces of the puzzle, if you really want, you just need to have the time and the willingness to put them together, and then you're good to go. No, so I don't think right now it's just one program that gets you there, but the community that can get you there. What we're trying to do now, and we actually have put a sort of a program that is called the Deep Tech series, where we're trying to bring the last element that I always found missing, which is the investment side. So in Spain, in Catalonia in particular, we have a big gap in the sense that international VCs don't have much awareness of the spin-offs that are coming from the centers and the very good technology that is coming out from, Spain in general, Catalonia in particular. So we've been putting this program that we bring in the investors into this process. Before and right after, they need to be the ultimate judges. Am I willing to invest in this? Am I going to take the risk? And that's probably the one step that we are far to the Stanfords and, etc.
Step by step.
Exactly. And so maybe just then focusing back on the business a little bit, you're just under 6 years in, I believe, or just approaching your 6-year anniversary pretty soon as Mitiga. How's it going?
It's going great. So in terms of timing, we were established in February 2018. During that year, we were still under the umbrella of the National Supercomputing Centre. We were able to raise a couple of non-dilutive grants from the Commission that were mainly focused about what I just said. So yes, we had established the company, but we know very little about the industry. So I spent, a good 9 months with this money that the Commission granted us to actually evaluate the market, to do proper market fit, do a couple of POCs before we even went commercial, before even the spin-off was real. It wasn't until late 2018, beginning of 2019, that we actually did a full equity round. We also were able to get on SMA instrument phase 2, which it was a couple of million. So then you were ready to go. You had significant funding, you had a team, you had a technology, that all these have been working together for quite a long time. And then you were ready, you were ready to start, to do the first step. So since then, it's been like a journey altogether. So obviously we started working on volcanic hazards for the aviation industry. So now go back in time, put yourself in 2019. We start having good traction with big logos and so forth. And COVID comes, and COVID, aviation, and volcanic ash did not, coincide in the same equation. So there was no aviation. And for the little aviation that there were, the last thing they were interested is in to invest any money in, how is volcanic ash going to impact me, Luckily, we did 2 bets that if we would probably have done differently, we would not be here, and hence the fragility of the startup ecosystem. One was, before that happened, we had the vision that risk had to be related to insurance. So we kind of like start putting the company more towards an insurtech, evaluating not only the risk of volcanic hazards, but others, and having our customers to be those that they need to collateralize the risk. Because what we knew is that traditional risk has been modeled from a probabilistic stochastic point of view. So that means We look at the last 100 years, we get a trend, we project that trend, we call that future, and we make decisions based on that. But that is fundamentally wrong from a geophysics point of view. But when the arrival of climate change came, the next 10 years are not representative of the previous 10, let alone the last 100. So the ones that they were going to be more impacted, beyond those ones that they need to respond, we will get that later, were those ones that they needed to collateralize the risk. Their whole business was at risk, because they were making decisions based on the past, on models that they were telling you the trend. Were the models wrong? No, they were just answering a different question. So that's where we really saw the opportunity. So we shifted the company to put all our knowledge to those ones that they really needed our modeling capabilities, because the aviation didn't need it because they weren't operating. And in terms of aviation, to not totally do a 180-degree turn, we made one bet. And one bet was basically to go for a very large tender for European airspace, which it was Eurocontrol, to be the providers of what's called the crisis management, which is basically anything that it has related to natural disasters in airspace, who's going to model that. And it was a big tender, so we went with that. We got it. And then, kind of like that part of the company was secure for the next 7 or 8 years, because it's a 9-year process. And we put all our efforts into becoming that innovative risk modeling company. Years later, when we, and me being very connected to the UN and to the EU, we saw that the regulatory framework, and now coming back to that equation that I told you before, we had the science, and finally the regulatory segment, it was coming together. No, then it was the time to actually move from an insurtech to be a climate tech. So an insurtech could be anything, as long as you're doing modeling for the insurance sector. A climate tech is, let's focus only on those hazards that they are exacerbated by climate change, which are called secondary perils. So there are few signals that earthquakes probably are, they have some relations to climate change, but definitely there are things like flooding, wildfires, droughts that that are totally related to climate. That's where Mitiga shifted into a climate risk company. And then from there, because science, the regulatory framework, and industry were now aligned, we no longer had to only sell to the insurance sector. We could sell to risk managers and asset managers, because now they need to comply with this regulatory framework. So in a way, we went from a very niche, very vertical company to being a horizontal company with a very clear roadmap, being able to sell a wide range of industries, which that has a challenge in itself, right? But at least, you have a bigger market to tackle.
And what are the main industries that you just mentioned, Alex? And what are the challenges?
Right. So, the main challenge is focus for a startup, right? So that's what all investors will tell you, that you need to focus. They want to have for you to be, very focused on a niche, and that's what we do. It's just like our niche is big. That's a little bit different, no? So I always like to group our stakeholders in three buckets, no? Asset managers, which is anyone who has an asset. So that could be a real estate company, that could be a hedge fund, that could be Tesla, that has a bunch of warehouses and offices and so forth. No, so anyone who has assets, by law, they're going to have to report their physical, their transitional, and their climate risk. The physical is for every asset that I own, whether that is an office, a warehouse, an infrastructure, whatever it is, I need to report what my risk is towards that asset against wildfires, flooding, severe convective storms, droughts, etc. I need to put a number. Then I need to do the same.
And these numbers, these reports are annual, or how
These
frequent are
reports are annual, yes.
they? Okay.
So, you, depending on the geographic location that you are, you need to comply with one regulatory framework or another. So there is the TCFD for financial disclosures. You have the European Taxonomy of Climate Change. You have the CSRD. So the world has agreed, since the Paris alignment, that we need to do something, and we need to report about what our climate risk is. That is what it's called physical risk. Then what these regulatory frameworks are asking you is not only you need to do it today, but you need to have at least an understanding of what's going to happen tomorrow in a climate scale. So 10, 15 years from now. So now you need to report today, you need to report 15 years from now, and then you need to understand what's going to happen in between, transition risk. So if you are a logistic company and you are aware that your flood risk is going to increase in the years to come, and you cannot pretend you're going to be able to do your supply chain the same way you do now, because if roads are flooding, flooded, you're not going to be able to take that road. If your warehouse is going to flood, you're not going to be able to supply whatever you have. So you need to think about how all your transition risks, so how your supply chain, your operations, your people are going to be disrupted by that change between now and that climatic scale that you're looking. Companies now need to report that. And that's basically how we help them to do that.
And I think for the non-scientific amongst us, which I very much include myself, when you talk about moving from a stochastic probabilistic model or probability-based model to what as far as I understand, is a kind of very data-heavy, very physics-based approach that you guys have today, could you explain what that actually means? Sure. What that looks like? What's the data points you're gathering? How are you basing things on stuff that isn't the past? What are you basing it on? Like, what does that mean?
Let me try to do that by a very simple example, and then we'll go how do we fit physics-based model. No? So let's start with the probabilistic model. Probabilistic model will tell you, and let's use the case of wildfires. If in the last 10 years there has been 10 wildfires, the probability of a wildfire this year is 1. Simple, no? That's a simple probabilistic analysis, no? Mm-hmm. Now we look through the window and we see that reality is not really like that. We have many wildfires, and not only we see many wildfires, but the magnitude of those wildfires has changed. We have larger, more intense, more damage associated to the wildfires. That's what a probabilistic model will tell you. If you go to a physics-based model, instead of just looking at probability and looking at the past and say what is going to continue being the present based on the past, you put that as a data point out of like thousands of data points you're going to put into the model. The physics-based is going to do for wildfires. We're going to look at the topography. We're going to look at the vegetation, the fuel, what's going to burn. We're going to look very much physics details into the vegetation. So what is the relative humidity of the floor? What is the height of the vegetation? What kind of plants are we? What kind of trees? What kind of like components? And that's kind of like one part of the story. Then we'll go into the dynamic component. What is the actual meteorological conditions in real time in that area? Very simple. If it rains, it doesn't really matter that the past will tell us that tomorrow should be a fire. It will not be a fire because it's raining, So you need to get that dynamic component 4 times a day, look at the velocity of the wind, precipitation rates, etc. Then you start getting all these variables, physics variables, and you put them into a mathematical equation. Something that makes sense, that allows you to say with a better likelihood, there will be a wildfire or not. And if there will be a wildfire, what will be the spread of that wildfire based on that meteorological condition, based on that fuel, etc. And then you iterate. You start putting a lot of scenarios. What if this variable is a little bit more, a little bit less? And then that's why you use supercomputing capability. You do hundreds of thousands of simulations to represent the most likely future event. And then from there, you just project to the future. And when you project to the future, you can do it using data from the past, current data from the present, and different climatic scenarios towards the future. And those ones, they're well defined by the IPCC. So we can have those what-if scenarios. With that information, it allows you to make, if you want, educated decisions of what can happen.
Very, very clear. And one of the questions I always wonder with businesses in this space is, most of the predictions you're making are 5-10 years out, right? Like or anywhere between, I suppose, tomorrow and 5-10 years out. How are you ensuring a high degree of accuracy, and how do you then use the real world data that catches up with your predictions to inform the work you've done, or the work you've done previously, and then the work you're going to do in the future?
Right. So it's a good question, and I always say these 2 things for transparency. So models are the representation of the truth, but they're not the truth. Therefore, there will always be an uncertainty. And as researchers that now we're in industry, our obligation is to report when possible that uncertainty. You have a lot of black boxes out there. So I tell you, Max, your risk is 73 for wildfire for your house. What do you tell your wife? Should we just move? Should we get insurance? I mean, 73 is the worst number. It's above 50, it's not close to 100. So, like, what do I really do? What I should be telling you to start with is 73 plus minus something. Because if I tell you, it's 99 plus minus 1, you are very much at risk. If I tell you 73 plus minus 2, okay, you are still in that ambiguity, is it bad or not? But that uncertainty-wise is low. If I tell you 73 plus minus 73, the same thing that if you flip a coin, no? So the first thing is about uncertainty. Models, they have uncertainty, and you need to report that uncertainty. The second part is that I always like to say is like models are as good as the data you drive them with. So
Hmm.
that 73 is going to have more uncertainty in one location and less in another. Even though we do global models, the quality of the data that you drive to those models is what's going to determine whether that model is to be trusted or not. And it's not logical to think that you have the same data in California, where you have a lot of good information that is open and public source and remote sensing and physical data that goes into the models. That if you go, I don't know, you don't have to go that far to Canada, or to Mexico, where you might have wildfires, but that information is not there. Then and we can go about how we solve this at Mitiga, no? But those are the two things that you really need to have first in mind when you're going to report risk. How do you how do you demonstrate that your models are accurate? By means of reproducing events that have happened with information before the event. What the concept of is basically like doing a modeling of what will happen, with information that just was before that happened. So you're trying to
Hmm.
reproduce the past future with previous information of that past. No, those are called hindcast analysis. You do a lot of those, a lot of those. You try to reproduce a lot of the physical phenomena that has happened in the past,
Yeah.
and in a way you have a percentage. I mean, you can measure by different type of statistical methods, no, the R squares or percentage of accuracy and whatever, and then that's how you tell your model is better or worse. And that's how you do it in science. That's how you publish papers, and that's what we did, bring that mentality from science to industry. Basically, if you can reproduce events in the past, you have half of the equation, because you're able to reproduce what happened. No, now you need to reproduce that event in the past, considering that the future is not like the past. Now is when you need to put different climatic events. So when you give a response to people, you always need to give a response within different climatic scenarios. So I will tell you, your home has a risk of 73 under this climatic scenario, 82 under this climatic scenario, and 93 under this climatic scenario, with the
Yeah.
uncertainty of plus minus for each. And that's the state of the art. That's what you can do, you know.
And you mentioned before, Alex, that from a go-to-market perspective, you have both a horizontal and a vertical approach. But talking on now that you were talking about models and how this fits into the go-to-market, I mean, how do you package all of these models, all of this data into a product slash solution that you sell to the customers? Tell us a bit more about how the product looks
Mhm.
like and works like.
Right. So the nice thing about the product that we offer to clients, which is called Earthscan, is that the underlying physics, the underlying modeling is the same for all. You just choose what are the, if you want the analytics that you need to report to the client that solves the questions that they have. No? So under that, we have two licenses, one that is more for reporting purposes, and at the end of the day is helping all these asset managers, which what they care right now is to report. It's not that they're going to do anything more than reporting with those information, but they need to report. So an asset manager that is a real estate company, for example, that at this point they need to have, need to do their ESG compliance or financial disclosures or whatever it is, they're going to use this information to just report. No, but then you have, for example, the risk managers. Those ones, they need to do something with that 73. They need to bring it down to 50. No, so you give them another set of climate intelligence with higher accuracy, with higher resolution, with more information. Their willingness to pay is also higher to be able to make decisions, and that's, so we have two packages of information for those ones that they want to look top bottom, as we said at the beginning. I want to report, but I don't want to get into the problem. And those ones that they are bottom up, risk managers and risk takers, those ones that they need to do something about the risk, or those ones that they need to collateralize the risk. Then there is a, like the big broader package that gives you more information, more climate intelligence for you to decide. And that's the go-to-market strategy. So basically, it's a software as a service. You subscribe for a number of assets that you need to either to report or to de-riskify. And there is a platform. You load your asset there, and you get immediately the climate intelligence that allows you to respond to the question you're trying to answer.
And so you talk about cutting the industry kind of horizontal focus versus vertical focus, and then you also talk about the approach being top down, bottom up. I'd love to understand. You mentioned, I think, and I read a press release on it, that you recently acquired some intellectual property rights from
Mm-hmm.
Serviced Earth, right, a UK-based company,
Mm-hmm.
and you talk about kind of when you're doing the top down approach, which is more reporting risk, versus the bottom up approach, which is more risk takers.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to understand a little bit more about that top down approach. One of the themes that I feel like is coming out of this is slightly that when someone is reporting annually on a set of risks, is there that level of engagement? Is that cadence sufficient? Should these big players be looking at higher cadence reporting? Is this something that actually we should have kind of ongoing dashboards with? Because I mean, at least at the moment, right, it feels like everything is moving so fast and not in a good direction that the idea of a kind of like regulatory based annual cadence for large financial institutions, for example, feels to me increasingly insufficient, and that potentially this more bottom up approach for kind of even large asset owners feels like the right way to go. Could you kind of talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. So here we can give you two answers, no? What I think and what I want, right? So are we doing enough as a society to solve or to kind of like be ready for the problem? Absolutely not. But on the other side, I've been in this space for 15 years, and what I can tell you is we're starting to do something. I was part of the team that, was working on the IPCC report in 2013. And, I can tell you that at a time when the results came from the scientific community to the industry, they weren't well taken. The industry wasn't ready to get away from fossil fuels. That like you were driving away from that, no, as a society. 10 years later, in a way, the work that we started working 10 years ago is starting to have an impact on how we make decisions. No, so if the question is, are we doing enough? No, but at least we're doing something, which I think that doing it's going to be exponential, just because the problem is more exponential of what we're doing. So there is no other way. No, so that's the way I see it. So in a sense, when you look at clients using this, what we see is that they have moved to consuming this kind of information voluntarily for ESG agendas or CSR agendas to business plan, P&L decisions. And you move from your personas being just the ESG and the innovations to being CFOs or compliance, or that the ESG and innovation people, they start having a significant budget to actually take care of this kind of information. No, so this is where we are, and this is where we start. The regulatory framework is coming, and it's coming hard. So, for example, the EU taxonomy of climate change was volunteer this year, but next year is, mandatory. It's going to add elements of pressure for the industry to actually do that. And the way I see it is very similar to, if you remember, the energy certifications when they came out for homes. When they came out, they were volunteer. Nobody did them. Only the like people who were very environmental conscious, which and we can talk about this when we talk about people and stuff, no? And there are more and more. Then it was mandatory, and still nobody did it. But it was a point that you could not register a property until you actually had that certificate, and then everybody did it. Well, that's what's going to happen with the same, no? So there's going to be adding more and more pressure to the point that this is going to become a must. And we'll have this podcast 10 years from now, and we'll just assume, that this is the new normal.
Fingers crossed.
Right.
Fingers crossed. And a big theme in that, I think, is as is often the case in anything that involves Europe, is regulation, right? Is this still a regulatory driven market? Has the momentum picked up enough with kind of private businesses that they're driving change themselves? Or is it actually still, as you talk about with home certificates, as you talk about with the need for kind of ESG reporting, it's still going to be the requirement of both the European government and local governments to drive this stuff and to force behavior change?
The good thing is has standardize the need. No? So at least now everybody's going to do the basic, and some are going to take it to the next level. The challenge is to raise that basic bar, to the point that makes sense. No, so what we're seeing that some companies are just doing it because they have still their ESG policies and compliance. A lot of them, they are already doing it to reduce the risk. They're starting to not only a posteriori but a priori as well. So that we have a model that is location planning. I can tell you that we're working with a very large infrastructure company that is looking to put the next airport in the Philippines. The Philippines has every other potential natural disaster that you have in mind. So now we are basically looking at hundreds of scenarios where where to put that airport to mitigate the potential, impact that it could be from every single hazard around. So instead of like having to go back a few years from now and put floodgates or reinforce, XYZ, you already kind of like put in, the necessary conditions. So we're seeing a change. And I can tell you that in the last 18 months, I have seen, something that it makes me, as a scientist and someone that was working on this 15 years ago, very happy, because it's finally, seeing that that equation is fully aligned. And as a CEO of Mitiga, very bullish that the direction that we're going is very good for society, but for the company as well.
Alex, I was thinking now that you were describing about the airport in the Philippines, that we've had in the portfolio, in the Kfund portfolio, similar companies from a go-to-market product perspective, and we've also looked at others where when you package the product and you start selling it and then you sell it successfully, I mean, how to secure retention and high usage from customers.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've seen it before, where you sell a solution for a company to solve a problem that they have, and it can be a temporary problem that's like 1 or 2 years, but then all of a sudden they churn,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to make sure that you expand the product into other use cases, or that you're on top of things with that customer so that they use other features that you have on the product. How do you guys think about this to not be like a one and done, and go through and extend the lifetime value with the customers?
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's a good one, Hyman. I mean, and it's like everything in life, no? If you want to have first row in that concert, you need to just wake up earlier than anyone else and kind of like be there and waiting. So, but and that is exactly what happens in a technological race, no? So while we are trying to deploy and take most of the market in climate intelligence and be the number one now, a lot of our thoughts is on how we're gonna do this, how we're gonna stay number one in the years to come. No, so and here there is a lot to be said about the top bottom and the bottom up approach. No, so right now we're trying to be number one as the top bottom approach, helping people to report their risk because regulatory frameworks are coming, they're gonna have to do it and so forth. But what about if the day of tomorrow we are able to give the bottom up approach, that high resolution, that physics based 30-meter resolution global wise to everyone? Not only the ones that they need to de-riskify the risk, but always the ones that they just need to report the risk. And that is where the big inflection point is. No, so there will be a lot of companies that they will be able to take climate models, do the statistical downscaling, and kind of provide some signals about reporting about climate risk. And you'll see in the next 12, 18 months that not only specialized companies like Mitiga will be able to do that, but your top consultancy companies that will start doing that. Because at the end of the day, let's not lie to ourselves. It's always easier to go to the big four consultancy companies to get this than to go to Mitiga. The
Hmm.
question is, are those big four companies have that necessary knowledge inside? Well, no, because they partner with the Mitigas of the world. But in the next 3 years, they will have that because I'm not going to call it rocket science, but it's something that it's doable. No. But how about if 24 months from now, Mitiga is already offering that next thing? you know the next thing that everyone is going to be looking for 5-10 years from now, which is that physics based, you need to have supercomputer and GPUs, physics based models, so top PhDs people. That's going to be difficult for most companies to do that. No, you're going to have niche companies that are going to do this. So what I see moving forward is in climate risk, there's going to be a consolidation game. So, like everything, when a new thing happens, a lot of companies are going to come out. A lot of Martians are going to pop up, and there is going to be a lot of companies that are going to be able to do things. But as the regulatory framework gets a little more restrictive, and it goes into words like physics-based, high resolution, a lot of these mushrooms they will not be able to grow just because this is not something you put together in 1 or 2 years. I mean, it took us 10 years, to put all this together. Then is when, as Max was saying, consolidations will happen, like what Mitiga did with Cervez. However, Cervez was, I would say as good as Mitiga, in the sense of knowledge and so forth, because it's a conversation for another day. But I think there will be a lot of smaller companies that they will be very good at what they do, but not have enough market to either be interesting for VCs or to have a very, like flourish revenue, So then we will start, consolidating. That's where my vision is, and that's what I think we could still be at the front row of that concert that we want to be.
And when you talk about being the first of the concert, to stretch this analogy,
Mhm.
I read in, I think, the TechCrunch publication of your fundraise earlier this year that almost half of your 30 strong team, I presume your team is bigger than that now, but almost half of your team hold PhDs. And I
Mhm.
think this is a really interesting question or area, especially for climate tech startups that are more likely to involve high levels of science than your average B2B SaaS. How do you, maybe starting with, I presume the best way to be front row of that concert is to have the best talent, right? And have the
Mhm.
people who can build the best algorithms, understand the data in more interesting ways, invent, as you were talking about your Chilean boss, invent novel ways of gathering new data, etc.
Mhm.
How do you, what's your approach to talent? How do you try and bring in the best people, and then how do you retain them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first, some metrics that I think it will help us to understand the company that we build in Mitiga. No, as you mentioned, Matt, about 50% of the company they have their PhD, but also like 5 to 10 years of experience in industry. So there is a switch in mind that you need to put to a researcher to be 100% productive in industry, but
Mm-hmm.
still keep the reasoning why they're doing things. I always say that working, for example, with the humanitarian space, well, maybe it only represents less than 10% of the revenue of Mitiga. It's probably about 40% of the reason why people work at Mitiga, because of that impact that you really have. When you think about doing a catastrophe one for the Red Cross, giving access to, money to people right after a disaster, and you can actually collateralize 7 million people, that's something that people wakes up and wants to go to work. Not that selling to an insurance is not relevant enough.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's not only about that expertise, but it's the right mindset. To that, I'll give you two metrics that I think are also very important, and then I'll go straight up to your question. So not only we have 50% of PhDs in the company, but also 50 we have gender balance. So we have as many men as many women, which this is very relevant in a technological company and not easy to fit. Which it gives you like a full understanding about how the world is, half and half. So we have half and half, and then not only that, but we have about 87% of diversity in management. And what I'm saying all this is because when we make decisions, we make decisions. We have a global. Sorry, there is a mosquito here that it's kind of like making my life. So when we're trying to provide a global solution, you're representing a global society. So you need to have a global company that actually thinks about that society, or else you will end up, like maybe selling to a very tailored, but not scalable industry. So when you think about retention of talent, the first thing that you need to do is to give them purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there will be another company that it will give you more salary, there will be more perks, but you just need to give them purpose and make them feel part of that solution. So that's one of the big things that we try to do at Mitiga. We'll do it better or worse. I mean, that will be a question for our employees, not for me. But that's one of the things that we definitely put a lot of effort, to understand how people feels about waking and up and working at Mitiga. The second that you can give as a startup is flexibility, and flexibility comes in a lot of shapes and forms. So we were talking about kids before, and how difficult it is sometimes to work when you have your kids running at home and so forth. So and we learned that from COVID. So something that we
Mm-hmm.
do in the summer, for example, is so people can have extended weekends. Fridays people don't work, for the whole scholar period where, people, you have kids at home from that day until they go back at home, Fridays are off. Sure, you'll put a couple of hours here and there during the week, to compensate that. And productivity hasn't gone down, all the contrary. And then, people feels that they can really disconnect because the 4 days during the summer that you're working at Mitiga, like any day at Mitiga or any startup, they're intense. Like it builds bridges, like with the family, you need to negotiate and, your time and so forth. So those are
Mm-hmm.
things that you can do. No, unlimited personal days. Father and mother can feel sick. You don't even have to worry about asking us, for a day off. Just because at the end of the day, people will appreciate this and they will come around. No, these are I think one of the reasons why people, like they're probably happy. And again, that will be a question for them to come and work for us. But what we are seeing, and maybe we can expand this just not to Mitiga, but to to the market now. I'm seeing two interesting things now. So people, then they're in my age, late 30s, early 40s, that we have done things other places. Probably you have made your money before and whatever. You're starting to ask yourself, and I think it's also the perspective of kids, it's like, what have I done, to this world? What I'm going to tell my kids that, they should be proud of. And you might have been very successful in a lot of companies, but are they going to be proud just because you made money? So that is the one thing that we're starting to see through a lot of interviews, profiles that probably we cannot afford, but that they're applying to our positions just because they want that driven purpose every day. And surprisingly so, we're seeing this back to the Generation Z. These young people that they're coming out of college, they already are they have into their values already working on sustainability and things that are driven. Maybe it is the millennials that we still kind of like have to convince. These are the ones that probably are like you have a more widespread distribution of what they're looking for. But we're starting to see that more people are purpose driven, and I think that is we can come up with a lot of perks and whatever, but at the end of the day, people needs to want to do what they do, and that's why people stay in places.
Sure. And then actually just on that topic of you talked about the need to change research, or the need for researchers to go through a kind of process of understanding, I presume, the commercial sides of business and how the cadence of works differently, how distribution of tasks, etc. Could you explain a little bit more of that? Because I feel like you've gone through that process yourself, right? What does that mean practically for your average PhD holding climate researcher who might want to go into something commercial and might want to kind of enter that business world?
Yeah, and it's a personal journey that some would be willing to do and some not. So scientists we are a specific breed, like breed, and like engineers, like doctors, like everyone else, no? And you quickly see if a scientist wants something else or not. A lot of scientists are very happy about getting their scientific score up and up and up, and publish more papers and get more projects, and and have an impact by means of research, which is very much needed. And then you quickly see in your career as well if that's enough or not. If like publishing papers, doing these 4-year European grants with large consortia and the top of the art scientists and whatever, but when the project finishes, that project goes into a drawer. You close the drawer, you take the key, you throw the key, and you start trying to apply for another project. At some point, that for some people, I'm not saying for everyone, it might get old or it might not be enough. And there is a need that people are happy just doing that, or else we will not push the state of the art. But you're starting to see a segment of that community that they want more. They want to transfer that knowledge into the industry. They want to create applications, not only that just commercial, but applications that industry are going to use. Hence, they're going to have an ultimate impact in society. So that's the mindset that a lot of these programs are trying to encourage. There's enough space for scientists to stay in science and for scientists to walk that bridge from science to industry. And a lot of us, we go back and forward. So we give back to the scientific community by doing projects with the scientific community and enabling the scientific community to continue to grow. So that's the first thing that you're seeing. So if you find that in yourself, quickly you need to see, you need to make some specific decisions, which is do I know what's on the other side of the bridge enough to make that decision? Am I going to put the time to actually to find out? And do I have the vehicles to actually cross that bridge? That's what I was saying at the beginning, that you need to put the time. This is not something that overnight you just wake up and say, yeah, I want to be an entrepreneur, and and I'm a scientist, so that's it, I'm going to change my hat. It's a journey, and I think as a community we have a lot of good tools to do that. What I'm feeling is that we need to ask ourselves what's next. I was the other day at the 25th anniversary of the University Polytechnic of Catalonia, of a program that it's entrepreneurship program. 25 years. So they were real pioneers. I told them, in a way, they were the first spin-off, of that. No, and it was very nice because we were able to share a panel with Ruben for Fractus, which was probably the first spin-off that came out, from the UPC 25 years ago. And the story of Fractus is super interesting on how they changed their business model from one thing to another. And then there was a few of us that probably we have been in this ecosystem for longer, for shorter, no? And what those 20 years were. And the one thing that I took away from that event is the work that we have done in the last 2 or 3 years is as representative as the work that we have done in the last 20. So if we're able to keep that trend and we keep, that, then it's promising. the gap that we have with the London entrepreneurial ecosystems, or the gap that we have with the Stanford entrepreneurial ecosystems, is shorter and shorter if we keep with the trend.
And just before I pass over to Jaime, on that topic, I think from our perspective, kind of representing the private sector, as it were, what can our side of the table be doing more to encourage those kind of scientists, those kind of profiles to be coming and working? Because like I observe more and more each year, right? The UK Entrepreneur First does some amazing work in kind of like the deep tech space, trying to find more scientific profiles and link them with business profiles. You've got Marble in Paris doing this with a climate focus now. I think you're seeing, honestly, every 6 months more and more of these type of kind of deep tech, climate tech accelerators that are structured to focus or to combine the efforts of business people and scientists.
Mm-hmm.
What can we be doing more as the private sector to keep pushing this forward, to keep supporting this?
Well, you are already. If you are, I'm not sure if you are aware, but Kfund, for example, is already participating in some of the events that we put in for the Deep Tech Summit on November 28th, where we're bringing a range of local, national, international VCs to discuss about what are the gaps, not only between different investment stages, so seed, early stage, and growth, and how these are starting to blend in a strange way, but also how the mentality is different between a local VC, a national VC, and international VC within the same stage. And this is something that I have seen very, very clear in the past year. So an early stage VC is very different if you get it from the States, than if you get it from London, than if you get it to Madrid, and if you get it from Barcelona. Why is that? And what is very important, and answering your question, is that you guys provide a lot of information for every analyst. I don't know, Jaime, that you have a Kfund, how many startups they look into a year? 2,000, just to give or take 1,000, 2,000. You guys have the data. You have all the data about who is ready, who's not ready, in what sector. Is it geographically based? Giving back that information and being able to identify the gaps together, and BC is being involved into, if we go back into the tech and now spin-offs, because it's the conversation of today, being part of that innovation journey with the centers themselves before the spin-off actually even is constituted. It's the perfect match. Because you guys will have a lot of more visibility about what's coming up, and then you will have more opportunities into early stage investments that make sense. B, the community will be much more ready to actually go to that first and second investment round, where we'll have better valuations, we will be more prepared, etc. Because at the end of the day, and I live in the US, I live in Mexico, I live in the UK, and I live in Spain. Would I say that the technology net profile in Spain is less than England? I'm afraid not. Is it less in the US? I'm afraid not. If you actually look at the metrics, Europe publishes more deep tech papers than the US and China, But what is where we are behind? In believing in ourselves. You go to an American, and the first thing that they do, they open their shirt, they see that they have some scars because they have failed before, and they are proud of that. You go here, and if you have a scars, the first thing that you're going to try is to hide them. It's like, I don't want anyone to see, because the community here, it has penalized us. If you fail, you're a failure. No, if you fail, you step closer to success. No, that mentality needs to change, both from the entrepreneur side, from the the local VC ecosystem. No, and then from there, I think we are ready to compete. But the first thing is, we entrepreneurs, we need to believe that, and you, ecosystem of VCs, need to encourage that. And with that changing mentality, I think we're ready.
Now that you're talking about VCs, Alex, and before the last closing questions, tell us a bit about the funding history of the company. Because, probably listeners out there, they've heard a lot about a significant increase in climate-focused VCs in the past, I would say, past 5 years, let's put it that way. And we also know from our experience that, fundraising, not specifically for climate tech, although probably, but even for deep tech companies or companies solving very hardcore problems. It's not the same as fundraising for a SaaS company selling to SMBs and putting together a self-serve product. So tell us a bit about your funding history, and how have you managed that part?
Yeah, and that, and thank you for the question. That will be something that we will, in particular, be discussing at the summit of the 28th and the Deep Tech Summit, which you guys will be there as well. So, deep tech, um, beautiful word, complicated to agree. You know what it means for everyone, no? So for me, the first of all, deep tech is a stage. I don't know if
Hmm.
deep tech goes all the way to growth, you know, because I mean, deep tech is something that at the beginning is something, and then at the end is a tool, no? Because
Hmm.
you become a deep tech company on something, on climate, on engineering, on materials, or whatever it is, no? But so if we have that in context, I think what is very important in the deep tech ecosystem is to understand that deep tech are not e-commerces. They are not going to be a summer love where there's going to be, you know, like a spike where, you know, everybody's going to be happy. It requires time. Um, Whether you like it or not, and depending on the specific company, you know, but you're going to have to invest some money pre-revenue, you know, or like with very little revenue. You're going to have to live during few years with a lot of project-based contracts until you actually get the right key where you can just like operationalize, put a SaaS, or, you know, scale all this up. So it's a little slow at the beginning, but then the slope can be much higher than others, no? Where other companies are completely the the other way around, you know? So you have a big hype at the beginning and it's
Yeah.
difficult to maintain it, no? And the investor needs to be ready for that and willing. So it's a long-term journey, no? So the innovation journey is a long-term journey, you know, and so it's not something that is in and out. How is it been for us, no? So I think one of the things that we did very well was to be able to, when we spun out, we were not in need of a lot of cash. So we had these, you know, competitive grants that, you know, allow us to have a roadmap from a development point of view. We were able to secure at that time a very good round, considering, you know, the macroeconomics and so forth, for a very niche, if you want, market.
How big was that
And
round?
the round was a small in size, but we got a good valuation about it. But it was about 1.2 million in size. But that was already, you know, we had a couple of million that we had from non-competitive grants, so we were
Grants,
good
yeah.
to kind of like go, no? Then COVID came, you know. So thanks to that round, and thanks to that competitive, non-dilutive money, we were able to not go to the VC market until very recently, and we were able to grow the team through COVID. And obviously, COVID, we were a little bit more, you know, conscious. I mean, Mitiga has always been very, very capital efficient, no? So in a way that we always knew that this was a long-term road, and we were here for the long term. So in a way, we had to make sure that this was sustainable. So we were able to be, you know, sustainable with revenue and continue getting some non-competitive, non-dilutive grants and so forth, which is not the main mission of Mitiga, but we always try to have a couple of million incoming that covers about 60% of our R&D, and that's kind of like sustainable, no? And we put all the money that we raise and the money that comes from revenue into product, no, and to continue growing. So in 20 early 20 early this year, early 2013, we went for a Series A round. Previously, before the end of the 2022, we did convertible, which I always recommend for deep techs to go that route. You do a small convertible that allows you to go to the round with no needs of money, you know, and so you can properly negotiate about what you are valuable for, no, not the needs that you have. And then after that, we went through a Series A. We were very lucky because it was oversubscribed. We were able to choose between very good funds, and then we just, you know, bet on having a round that it was something that I always wanted to build around Mitiga. First, diversity, as we spoke before, but not only about people, but about mentality. So half of the round was raised in the US, half of the round was raised in Europe. They both have good and bad things, no? So it's good to try to get
Hmm.
the good things from both.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the round was your traditional financial VCs, and part of the round where, you know, you're dedicated to strategic VCs and even corporate VCs. So we were in the insure ecosystem, so we got the fourth larger insurer in the world, which is Nationwide, into the cap table, which not only they were an investor, but they put some pipeline as well. So, you know, in a way, you had your client investing you, you know, and learning from your client. We got Microsoft Climate Innovation Fund, one of the first times that they invested in Spain. It's a $1 billion fund that is basically looking about using applications in like technological applications, high performance computing, AI into the climate ecosystem. Having Microsoft into the cap table, as you can imagine, is great, because it allows you to have that scalability, and especially with them, we have been part of their marketplace, so we're selling through them as well, which is good. And then we had another important thing, as the reason I was also telling people coming to Mitiga, if we say that we believe about impact and we believe about waking up and doing the things that we want to do, that needs to be represented in the cap table as well. It can just not be bottom up; it needs to be top bottom as well. So we got an impact fund based in Madrid that is called CREAS, and then Kibo, which was a local fund here. They led our series, and Faber from Portugal was the one that did the convertible. So we felt that we had a very balanced, very diverse, very positive cap table that was ready to support us into the next journey. Things have gone very well, and traction has shown us that we needed to double down on this. That's when we did the acquisition of the IP of Cervez. We grew, we went more into the climate space, and now we are close to finishing another race that is just putting more fire or more wood into the fire to continue growing. Because as I mentioned before, this is a race to take in the market in the next 12 to 18 months, but also being ready for what's coming. And it will be a consolidation game. So we need to have that muscle to take any opportunities that comes to our way.
Fantastic, and congratulations on the journey so far, by the way. Alex, last closing questions. So one, can you recommend us a book or some form of content? And can you also recommend or suggest someone to invite to the podcast that hasn't been on before?
Yes. So I'm going to be an entrepreneur and be disruptive, and I'm not going to recommend you a book, but I'm going to recommend you a show. And not that I like watching shows more than books, but it's just a show that I have been watching recently. And it has nothing to do with entrepreneurship. It has nothing to do with, climate or anything like that, but it has to do a lot about building teams. And it's funny. So I guess, people will enjoy it. And it's called Ted Lasso. And I don't know if you have seen it.
I wasn't expecting that.
You weren't, no?
I love that.
But, I can give you the typical book about the typical 10 books about entrepreneurship, the world we have read, and that's great. But what I feel, and we go back to a question you asked before, is this is about people, and sometimes you build something you know nothing about, and sometimes you build something that you know a lot about. No, the most important thing is that you don't know what you don't know, and the people who you are with is who's gonna take you over the line. No, and this show is all about that. About this guy that basically doesn't know anything, and I'm not gonna spoil it. Doesn't know anything about what it's being hired for, but knows a lot about how putting a group of people towards the same mission and towards the same goal. So if I can just give something away, I will put that show into the hands of some entrepreneurs.
I love that as a recommendation. That's fantastic.
And I'm sorry that is not a book. Yeah, so that will be about the book. And I promised you, Max, that I was going to think about what entrepreneur I was going to recommend, and I didn't think about that. So I'm going to do this on the spot. And let me think about someone that, let's do it the other way around. So instead of someone that that I admire and that that I have looked forward and whatever, let's put someone that I think is an uprising star coming. And you're going to have to give me 30 seconds because this is going to be on the spot. Right. I don't remember the name. And I don't remember the company, so you're gonna have to do a little bit of work, and I'll send it to you by email if I don't remember. But it's a very young guy, didn't finish college. I think his family comes from entrepreneurship, so he just decided to do that. And I think he started his company at the age of 16 or 17. And I'll promise I will send you the email.
Is it Spanish?
It's Spanish.
Spanish.
I met him into this process of Endeavor that I'm going through. So he's one of those that is going through that. It's a company that basically the idea is simple. Basically, it's a service for people that like you need to bring your car to do the ITV, the inspection. You need to bring your car to do a maintenance. You need to do like to wash your car.
Yeah.
Do you know what company I'm referring to?
Ricard Guillem of Kfund, probably.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So if he hasn't been in your show,
no, he hasn't.
I would recommend him because I felt that first he made me feel very old, and I'm young. And it's like, dude, you're 16 and you already are like, thinking
What
about
are you
all
doing
this.
here?
But
Yeah.
like, and now I probably he's 19, no, but I mean, when I had lunch with him with another bunch of people, and that's the future. Like these kids that like they don't longer think about like I mean, and I promote I have PhDs and masters and whatever, so I promote going to school and everything, no, but you don't have to. And sometimes you just identify a problem, and finding a solution is not that difficult, and it's just to be bullish enough and jump into the water and start swimming. And I think that this guy should explain his story for sure. I'll definitely listen to it.
Nice.
Fantastic.
Good suggestion. Good two suggestions. Thanks a ton, Alex.
No
And
problem.
we really appreciate your time because this has been great. So thanks a lot for coming on.
No, thank you for having me, and good luck.
Thanks, man.